relationships and just really help enforce tribal laws that are based on tribal values, tribal culture, and tradition. And I believe in their mission and I believe in tribal sovereignty. And those are pretty much the main reason why I keep fighting the good fight and trying to promote and help with education for our court staff as well as others too, to help them understand about what great tribal court systems there are out there.
Thank you. I'm so happy to hear about how, this has been, you were on the other side with your family and then it motivated you, which gives me inspiration that people could be hearing this, going through the system, and then maybe that could inspire them to want to know more about tribal courts. Before we, oh yeah, go ahead, team. Sorry.
Okay, maybe you're going to touch on this, but I was wondering if we can get a definition for tribal sovereignty before we move forward.
Thank you. Thank you for pointing that out. Yes. So tribal sovereignty is where tribes have this inherent right to self-govern their own people. And so over the years, most likely since I want to say the maybe early to mid 1800s, the Supreme Court has passed decisions and have decided certain cases that have reaffirmed tribal sovereignty, that tribes have always had tribal sovereignty. No one gave it to them. Congress didn't give it to them. The United States didn't give it to them. No one gave it to them. Tribes have always had tribal sovereignty since time immemorial. And so there are certain legal cases that stem back that far and have always reaffirmed this idea that tribes have always been sovereign. Now, since the mid 1800s, a lot has happened with our country. And so, unfortunately, the federal government has chipped away at tribal sovereignty over the years. And so we have we have that to work with these days. So however, tribes are still sovereign over many parts of their government, their membership, just kind of their programs and what they could do with their communities. However, there are certain federal laws out there that do say what tribes can and can't do with certain things. So tribal sovereignty, for the most part, tribes have it and tribes exercise it. And this is seen with tribes creating their own tribal court systems. For tribes to create their own court systems demonstrates that tribes are exercising their sovereignty to handle court cases in their own forums, in their own communities, and hearing cases for both civil and criminal.
I see it, and let me see if this is like a good analogy. And I don't know if it is, but is it like you have the right to govern within your own home, your family, like how you want to raise your kids? And although there's a larger community out there within your home, you can make your own rules, like no TV until you get your homework done or whatever. But is it kind of like that? Like tribes are able to govern within their reservation for their membership, for their citizens? Is that how a good way to kind of, I'm trying to think of like people that don't know anything about tribal sovereignty and courts and whatnot. I'm trying to think about like, how do I explain it to them?
Right. So you could see tribes as little mini countries within the United States. They have, for the most part, most tribes have reservations, not all, but some, or they have some type of ancestral territory that perhaps their constitution deems as tribal land. So wherever the tribal land is kind of carved out, or there's just some understanding of ancestral territory, that tribes have um, this authority to govern over that according to their laws. And so they can pass certain laws within these mini countries. Now, I will say that tribes can pass their own laws related to their members, related to public safety, related to programs, related to, having their own police, having their own, social services, having their own, just pretty much imagine like a city government and all of the components to make a government work. And then tribes have that too. We have monthly tribal council meetings, which are similar to city council meetings. We have a panel, usually a tribal council, which is similar to our city council. The main things that tribes can't do, which kind of makes them not completely 100% sovereign, is that they can't sell their own land, the land that is in trust, that's in this special status under the government, under the federal government, and they can't have a military. And so usually sovereign nations have their own military and they are clearly able to sell their own land. But for us on the reservation, tribes can't just kind of sell. Like it has to go through a process because we don't have that authority to kind of sell our own land.
Because the land belongs to the government?
Well, it's kind of held in trust. So it's kind of the federal government kind of, I guess you could say, like takes care of it. But we just kind of like manage it and just kind of we're on it. But we always have to kind of get permission to do certain things, especially with like trading or selling or something regarding the land. So it definitely can get really complicated, but just understanding that we have these tribal nations that act very similar to their own, or they're really their own governments, similar to small little countries, and that they do everything similar to like a city, with the exception of not having a military and not being able to sell their own land without permission from the federal government.
Thank you so much for that definition and that. I've literally been taking notes, and like some of the stuff like I know, but it also just like being able to like articulate it and like write that down, like, helps me every time. But I'll pass it off to Jen. I'm literally writing notes like I'm in your class right
now. Okay. So we have a second question, but before we go on to that, I wanted to go back to what you were saying. And we have a question in our comments about, can you explain what is 1492 for those that don't know what that means? Earlier in your kind of like introduction, you were talking about how
I did see that. So that is the start of the change of Native lives as we traditionally knew. 1492 is the start of a European explorer named Christopher Columbus coming down to the Taino lands and just pretty much taking over. And really he, went back to Europe and told everybody he found this land and it's got all these resources. And that just started the whole process of not only Spain starting to colonize, but also England and then France. Those were kind of the big three countries that came over early on to start colonizing. So when I say 1492, that was the start of the end of our traditional ways of living for Native people. 1492 represents the start of settler colonization for Native people.
And I'd like to give a shout out to the comedy troupe, the 1491s, which is a comedy troupe. Some of them have blown up. They've gone on to make Reservation Dogs, but they're name was 1491 because that was like the last year that we as Indigenous people were truly free without an invasion of others coming to this land and basically destroying it. And I'll be the one to say that because that's my perspective. So I don't want to put pressure on anyone else, but that's what I like. While you're talking in my head, I'm screaming like, they invaded! They're the invaded! Okay, I'm sorry. I'm getting a little passionate. Calm down.
You know, it's a very hard topic to teach American Indian Studies, Intro to American Indian Studies, because there's nothing really happy about 500 years of colonization. And where are we at today? We're still fighting from the beginning. We're still trying to get back our land and everything else that I mentioned earlier. So it's just we're still going, but it's okay because we're resilient and we resist what we can in terms of, you know, just kind of the forced assimilation that has been brought upon us. And we are just, we're fighters.
Yeah, I think, I know that we are very resilient. We are miracles. We're still here. They did literally have an Indian act where they wanted to get rid of us across the land. And yet we're still here. We're still thriving. A lot of people are still speaking their languages and our traditions. So I think that that's great, but I do want to, like just before I got on here, I saw that on social media that the Navajo president had to put out an alert to all his people because they're being targeted in these new ice raids in Arizona. And they're being racially profiled, and because, you know, we have dark skin, dark hair. And I haven't seen anything about my tribe, Tonatam Nation, which is in Arizona, but like this is very real what's going on right now. And I bring up the resilience because I think there's going to be a lot of people that have never been in situations like that, not just Native people, but other people that are out there that will be going through very similar things that we've had as non-white Caucasian people have had to deal with, like, since the beginning of this country. So we have to lean into our resilience and just know that, like, we have that within us. Okay, deep breath.
Deep breath. I know it's a lot.
All right. So my second question.
Yes.
Or our second question. Can you share an example where a tribal court decision significantly impacted justice or sovereignty for a Native nation?
Yes. So I have a slide to share on this. Do I press settings or present?
I'm not sure, and we will find out shortly, hopefully through text. Oh, you know what we didn't do while we were
what?
Oh my God. I'm so sorry, April. We never announced that she's here. I'm so sorry. I feel so bad. Our other co-host, April Cordova, she's not able to be with us today physically on screen, but she is in the back doing all these wonderful pop-ups that you're seeing. She's making comments. She's monitoring, doing all of the things necessary to make sure that we're engaging. And we never said hello to April. So I'm so sorry, April. We just were like so excited and we jumped right in.
I know.
So yeah. So the issue is that we're having an audio issue with April's connection. So we're asking how to do it. And I think the answer is on your end, Jennifer. If you see on the bottom, it says present, it says mute, stop cam settings, and then present. If you see that, I think that's what you push and you can show the slide.
I do see it.
Okay, great. Apologies, April.
Yeah, yep, and shout out to April.
I know if it was me, I'd be like, didn't even mention me.
There we go.
Yay. Take
Okay.
it away.
So your question was, I want to share an important tribal court decision that has happened. So I want to explain there was a case that is called Ex parte Crow Dog, and this case stemmed from a tribe in South Dakota, actually the Brule Band of the Lakota Sioux. And what happened was there was a dispute between two tribal members, and one person killed and murdered the other tribal member, the other tribal member. And so what happened was the tribe decided the punishment for that tribal member who murdered the other tribal member. And so the punishment was the name is Crow Dog. So Crow Dog murdered someone named Spotted Tail. So what happened was Spotted Tail had a family, and Crow Dog actually got sentenced by the tribe to pay restitution to take care of Spotted Tail's family forever. And for, I think there was a payment of like $800 and like 5 horses and 3 goats and 10 blankets. And so when you think about it, it's like when you take something away from another person, then they're left with nothing. And so this tribe wanted to kind of repair that gap where you have this family with no provider now. And so the tribe decided, sentenced Crow Dog to restitution to help pay for that family because they didn't have their provider anymore. So what happened was people from the federal government, non-native people, they did not like how the tribe punished somebody of for the charge of murder only through restitution. So people probably kicked and screamed. And so what happened was Crow Dog was arrested by this lower court, this lower federal court. And then what happened was Crow Dog said, no, my tribe already sentenced me. I got already sentenced for murder through restitution in my community. And again, the federal government's like, no, we want to punish you by the punishment of hanging because murder is, clearly that's an ultimate type of a thing that like, I mean, it's definitely very severe. And so federal government wanted this person to get hung. However, Crow Dog said, nope, I'm going to appeal, and Crow Dog appealed to the Supreme Court. And Crow Dog appealed to the Supreme Court, and the Supreme Court ended up saying, we agree with you, Crow Dog. We recognize that the tribe, the Brule Band of the Lakota tribe, made a decision based on, they sentenced Crow Dog to restitution, and they handled that case closed. So what happened was, I want to bring this to your attention, is that this case, this Crow Dog case, it started with a tribal decision. It went up to the Supreme Court, and the Supreme Court recognized this decision and honored this what is called traditional tribal justice. And so this is huge because it shows an example of the U.S. federal court recognizing a decision in like a traditional tribal justice forum. So this is really big. And so this really lays out the whole foundation for tribal courts in this country, because this U.S. Supreme Court recognized traditional tribal justice handled in their own forum, and it reaffirmed tribal sovereignty. So this case from our federal Supreme Court said, we recognize the tribe handled this matter, and we agree that Crow Dog should not be punished again. So case closed. So this is an amazing, amazing case that stems from the tribe and went up to get appealed to the Supreme Court. So this really lays the foundation of why and how tribes have tribal courts and that they're running and operating according to tribal traditions and tribal customs.
Awesome. Question, Professor. I'm almost scared to ask this question because I don't know what the answer is going to be. But the local sheriffs or police or whoever that arrested him, did they acknowledge and accept this judgment, or did they pursue on their own?
No. So what happened was the local, probably federal police, they did not like the tribe making this decision because they didn't agree with it. And so that's why they arrested him, and then they were going to prosecute him in a lower federal court and sentence him to get to a hanging.
But afterwards, after it happened, what happened
then?
Oh,
okay. So do you mean like after it went to the Supreme Court?
Mm-hmm.
Oh, okay. So thank you for asking. Something really big happened after that. So what happened was people were upset with the Supreme Court's decision, and the following year, the U.S. Congress passed a federal statute called the Major Crimes Act, and this act allowed the federal government to hear certain severe cases such as murder and kidnapping and arson and burglary in the federal court to be punished by federal punishments, such as going to jail forever or maybe getting hung as well. So this case, people didn't like it. And so there was a new federal statute that was passed after that, immediately after the following year. So things moved really fast to take away, to not allow tribes to handle these types of cases on their own anymore. The federal government wanted a piece of it.
Yeah.
And that still remains today.
And that was my concern, was that they weren't like, oh, okay, they handled it. And
no,
mostly I was just concerned about the, I guess, is it Crow Dog that did okay. So I was concerned about Crow Dog because I'm like, I know that those people did not accept that. They probably went in, busted in his home, and hung him himself, because I know how those people are. But did he live? Like, or did they?
My understanding is that he returned back to the community, and that he did. I never heard anything other than he was released from custody and able to meet and address the restitution that he owed to that family.
Okay, thank you. That is my question. Teen, I'm sure you got a few.
On mute. Thanks for sharing that case with us. I have not heard of this case before. And I'm like, oh my gosh, I need to take a tribal court class. But I think we'll go on to I feel like we answered this, but I want it to be like really like explain like why are tribal courts important. Like, I think I know why as like an Indigenous person, but like as a non-Native person to be like, then why is that important to them? You know? Just
I can give a faster answer. I mean, I teach this all the time.
Okay.
So why are tribal courts important? So tribes have this, they base their whole, they address conflict through they have a history through traditional tribal justice, where they focus on repairing relationships and also restoring balance. And so those like concepts have carried on through modern tribal courts, where tribal courts really try to focus on correcting behavior, helping people heal and get well, and just really addressing conflict and disputes to really help, again, repair relationships or handle the or just restore balance in some way. And the way we have certain tribal judges, sometimes that they'll be like, if somebody's in there for theft, for example, and the tribal judge will say, you know what happened to you? How did you get here? Why are you stealing? Like, what happened to you? And how can we help you? So, this approach of genuinely trying to find the root of the problem on why there's conflict, why there are problems within relationships, getting to the root of the problem and helping address how to fix that. I definitely like these tribal courts have this great approach rather than just punishment, rather than just throwing away the key for people who violate laws. Tribal courts really try to understand why and how they got there. So these courts operate off of tribal laws passed by tribal council, and tribes really have a lot of flexibility to hear cases faster than state courts. And also, they're addressing major areas that are of importance, such as not only do tribal courts hear civil cases like family law and domestic violence or guardianships or animal control cases, environmental type of protection cases, elder abuse. But tribes are also being creative and moving towards this hearing new cases called rights of nature. So tribes are passing laws to protect certain parts of their environment, of their reservation communities, to protect it. So, for example, I like to bring up the example Yurok tribe. Yurok tribe passed a rights of nature protection law to protect their river, the Klamath River. And so that river now has the same protections as a person. So no one can harm the river. No one can pollute the river. The river has a right to run smoothly, free of any type of toxins. So tribes are doing amazing creative things these days. And so it's important for everybody to know about the creativity that goes along with these tribal court systems that exist and the approach that come from tribal judges to genuinely try to still solve the root of the problem.
Awesome. Thank you so much. Yeah, I think that laid it out perfectly why they're important. And I'll hand it off to Jen before I ask more questions.
More questions?
I know, lots of questions. I think though, one thing that I want to highlight is that I like how it's more about restoring justice and balance as opposed to punishment. Like it's more about I don't know. I can't explain it. It's just like an Indigenous thing. It's like in line with our values. It's not about revenge or vengeance or anything like that. It's like, okay, this happened. Now what can we do to like equal it out or like restore justice, given our values, given the way that we look at life? It doesn't necessarily mean life for a life, eye for an eye, which is very Bible-centered thing. It's more about, okay, well, how can we bring restitution to the situation? And I don't think that people that came from other lands have that kind of mentality. I just think that even though I wasn't raised on a reservation, as an adult, I was able to understand like the values and the ethics and absorb all that and then kind of look at the other way that I was raised and like clearly see like the differences. And I can understand how non-native people would be really upset about like, well, we need to hang him and get the guy. But that's the way that they think, and that's not the way that a lot of Indigenous people think. Especially given at that particular time, I forget what the year it was, but it was like in the 1800s, like our population was dwindling. So that's like one less Indigenous person around. And I mean, obviously he murdered somebody, so he's like a murderer, but I mean, it's still, I don't know. I just wanted to say that much before I go into the next question. I just wanted to say, like, I think that like Native people, like, we're so awesome. We're all about like restoring balance and justice and not about like punishment. And I think that that's really cool.
I think that really separates tribal courts from state courts and other courts out there. That's like the big difference. It's about valuing our relationships.
Yeah, and like you said, and I know because just like from personal conversations that we've had in the past when you were actually like working at the tribal courts and you were telling me how, you know, judges would be like, so what happened? Like, I remember you, because the judges are a part of the community. So they like see and hear and know all of these people. And they're like more interested in like, what happened? How did you go from like this happy kid who was, you know, doing whatever, riding bikes or skateboarding to like committing whatever it was that happened? And like, I don't think a judge in a state court, and definitely probably not in a federal court, would ever ask like, well, what happened? Like, how did we get here? And that's an important piece because a lot of times things happen to people that like alter their experience, and then they make decisions that aren't good. They make choices that are harmful. But our courts are interested in not pursuing that. They're interested in like, let's bring you back into the fold. Let's bring you back into the community.
Right. Let's get you back to your job. Let's like help get you back to your family.
Exactly.
This reminds me of like, I know we're gonna get to the next question, but I don't know if you all saw that video that went viral about a judge that like asked the person like, oh, did you go to this elementary school? And like he just started crying. He's like, yeah, I did. And she recognized him, and she just like kind of was like, I guess had more compassion, you know, like really saw him as a human. And that's what comes to my mind when I think about like tribal courts and like how you said when you go into courts you don't know the judge, but in that incident was just like she saw him as like a human being, you know, grew up with him. Yeah.
I want to just like, again, I'll be quick. That there's a documentary called Tribal Justice. I recommend everybody watch it. You can watch it online. You can stream it for like $5. And Judge Abby Abenanti is one of the tribal judges that is one of the main people followed in that movie. And so what happens is that she's a tribal judge, and we get to follow her and walk with her through certain cases that she hears. And one thing she talks about is that she does not believe in justice by strangers, because that's kind of what our state courts and federal courts are. You know, they're so big, and they don't focus on communities. Like tribal courts were smaller, or tribes and we're smaller, and we have the judges are a part of the community usually, and they're able to know people, and they're able to know these people that they've grown up with. And so it's really just by somebody who you know that can be fair and can still enforce the law, even though they know them, right? So we can trust that you can know people, and they'll still be fair and follow the law in tribal courts.
All right. I'm taking another deep breath. A lot of information, and yes, thank you, April. She put up the tribal justice. Thank you for that suggestion. I saw that you can host a screening on PBS. So I don't know if there are any groups out there that would want to host a screening, but you can get in contact with PBS, and maybe you can host a screening and show if you want to dig deeper into tribal justice, tribal courts. Okay, getting to our next question, which is, we did why are important. Hold on a minute. Sorry, I have too many windows open while we are talking. Okay. What, if any, concerns should tribal courts have in regards to the new administration? Is there anything that they can do to dismantle tribal court systems and say it's null and void?
So we have to think about how there's been a history of let me see, where do I start? We have a history of presidents issuing certain executive orders in the past that have impacted tribal sovereignty, tribal jurisdiction. And we've had policies and statutes that have also been passed by Congress to make an impact on tribal jurisdiction. For example, Congress passed the Major Crimes Act that did allow the federal government to have say and input in certain tribal court matters related to certain crimes that impact both natives and non-natives. And so where we're at today is that no matter what happens, whether there's an executive order issued to impact tribal sovereignty or tribal court jurisdiction to take more power away from tribes in what type of cases they can and can't hear, or whether Congress does something, just know that there's always there's always a way to fight back, and understand that we are in a different position than we are 50, 100, 200 years ago, where we have educated natives, we have a lot of allies, we have a lot of organizations that are fighting for tribal rights like every day. And so we have all of these wonderful, smart, sharp brains that are not just going to let the federal government just kind of make decisions just because. There's so much Supreme Court case law that really reaffirms tribal sovereignty, and this ex parte Crow Dog case reaffirms this idea that tribal courts can exist legally and their tribes are able to handle matters on their own. And it just takes, so I think no matter what happens, it's important that just know that people will take the certain steps to not only address the challenge whatever happens legally through our federal court systems, or they could contact their local like BIA leaders in terms of, because then they'll tell the Department of Interior, and the Department of Interior is supposed to have this to maintain this trust relationship with tribes to make sure that we're okay and taken care of. However, or also you could, in terms of, usually tribes contact their federal representatives or, members of Congress to also express their concerns of what is happening. Sometimes there's more public awareness to really educate other people on what's happening, of the injustice of what may be happening if people are trying to eliminate tribal courts one day. And what happens is that public support is big, because then you gain more momentum, and then it could not only spread across the country, but internationally to perhaps the United Nations and to other countries to really support our fight here. So there's definitely, just all because a decision might happen, just know that we have options to be prepared to fight back. And again, it's just kind of something in our blood that we're not going to give up easy on. So it's definitely, we're in, these next 4 years, I think we're going to get, some challenges. There's most likely, like in terms of challenging tribal sovereignty, but we'll definitely be prepared to address those.
Okay. Thank you.
If one needed to get prepared, how can someone get involved or support tribal courts, especially during the Trump administration? I think this is the first place to start. Contact Jennifer, and learn about tribal courts, to be honest. And I feel like this has been awesome for me just to learn and sit down and listen. But I'll allow you to.
Yes. So I think what happens is that in terms of just campaigns, I think for if an issue comes up and we need help, well, we're going to need to bring awareness. We're going to be spreading that across social media, seeking support. So another, reason to keep it in a way. But I think that just in terms of really just being open and aware of what's happening with tribes, and just you can't so much go to a tribe and say, hey, I want to volunteer. Like, tribes kind of don't work that way because they only have so much space in their tribal offices. And I think just in general, supporting tribal courts in general, I think it really depends on, kind of where you're at or who you are, in terms of, like, if you're a student, you could most likely take certain classes to learn more about tribal courts in school or online. Sometimes there's online programs to learn. Or perhaps if you're a legal law student, you could intern in the tribal court. Or sometimes tribal courts have these externships, and you could participate and learn more about tribal courts. And also, just if you're just kind of a general advocate, let's say if you're a lawyer or somebody who just cares about human rights and justice, like sometimes, like in terms of perhaps finding a role in the tribal court sometimes, and just kind of being able to share ideas on how to contribute to making tribal sovereignty stronger and making tribal courts stronger as well. I mentioned that, well, actually, so tribal courts definitely have challenges related to funding and just certain challenges that they face with having to deal with these federal statutes that kind of impact negatively on tribal sovereignty. Brainstorming ideas on how to address those and how to ultimately restore, I want to say, ultimate authority to tribes that they've always had in the beginning. And there's just definitely some opportunities to be creative, to work with tribes, and just kind of be, I think, just definitely aware and support when you see issues, sign certain petitions, or just be able to advocate when you kind of see certain campaigns or certain laws that tribes may propose, and they need help getting those passed, having a lot of community support. So while you can't just go volunteer at a tribal court, or the public in general, I would just encourage education, and also just kind of being aware and just kind of supporting tribal issues related to tribal courts.
Sorry, one follow-up question for that. So I work at the Indigenous Journalists Association, so we're big fans about like tribal-owned media and going to like Indigenous journalists, like following their work to keep up to date. Is there any work that you follow, or any like certain tribal newspaper that you follow to keep up with tribal courts?
Yeah, so there are, I think the main legal news type of blog, like I guess it's like a organization, is Turtle Talk. Turtle Talk is where they post a lot of legal updates regarding cases that involve like tribes, that involves mostly legal in general topics. However, it also, they can include tribal court. This is like lawsuits too, or just certain things that are happening that can impact tribal jurisdiction. So Turtle Talk is definitely the main one that I want to point out for everybody to just kind of keep track of these legal cases that are happening all the time. Again, tribes are battling every day.
Mm-hmm. I've never heard of Turtle Talk, so thanks for the recommendation.
Yes, Turtle Talk's excellent.
Or is it turtletalk.com? Are they on Instagram or TikTok? No, I'm just kidding.
You know what? They're based through the Michigan State Law School, and it's a blog. I don't know. I like literally Google Turtle Talk. I could Google it, but it's like Turtle Talk. I think it's dot. Let me see. Turtle Talk.
Okay. Look at Jennifer bringing us all these resources and dropping all this knowledge. Anyone who is watching and listening, I have to say, for sure. Like, we're learning a lot today. So, Avril found it.
Oh, good. Thank you.
Blog.
Yeah.
Turtletalk.blog. Thank you. Yeah, that's the main one.
Thank you.
And the favorite cat.
Yeah. Okay, so next question, which is when I really learned more about tribal courts, was with VAWA. So for those of you that aren't familiar, the Violence Against Women Act has provisions allowing tribal courts to prosecute non-natives for certain crimes committed on reservations, such as domestic violence. Can you explain how this works and why it's important for both Native and non-Native people living on or visiting reservations?
Yes, so I will give my non-lawyer explanation. So VAWA is it's called the Violence Against Women Reauthorization Act. And this law was originally passed in 2013. And it focuses on really helping keep tribal people safe from domestic violence, from their intimate partners. And this law really allows tribes to prosecute charges related to dating violence crimes. So anything related to that, and again, involving an intimate partner. And what this law does is it also allows for tribes to prosecute non-Native people criminally who commit non-Native people who commit some type of dating violence crime to their partner on the reservation. This is a huge deal because there was a previous Supreme Court case. It is called Oliphant versus Suquamish Tribe of 1978, and the Supreme Court issued a decision that said tribes cannot prosecute non-Native people criminally in tribal courts. However, this VAWA Act actually made an exception involving dating violence crimes. So while it didn't restore allowing tribes to prosecute all non-Native people for all the crimes that happen on the reservation, but it allows the tribes to prosecute non-Native people for dating violence crimes. Now, there's a lot of kind of requirements that tribes have to go through in order to utilize that. So the tribes have to follow certain conditions that are listed in the law. And so once the tribe chooses to do that, then they can start prosecuting. And of course, they have to have an infrastructure. They have to have police. They have to have like they have like a contract. Either they have to have a jail or they have to have some type of contract with the local jail. So it's important for everybody to know, both natives and non-natives and whoever's visiting, is that tribes are definitely addressing these issues such as dating violence, and that clearly tribes worked with their members of Congress to help get this law passed and to make this exception to this Supreme Court decision, which was so amazing because people never thought that a Supreme Court case could be this Supreme Court case, which really is giving power back to the tribe, which is huge, right? So people didn't think this would ever happen in their lifetime, but it did. So it's amazing to know what Congress could do also to really help craft the laws. And they really do have the power to give certain power back to tribes. So tribes are taking steps to work with their members of Congress to pass laws that will address these certain matters. And also, so it's important to know that people are not going to get away with hurting people, with hurting their partners in the tribal communities, that there are laws that are getting passed to address this.
Before we go to the last question, I have not a follow-up question, but just kind of like a random question. For tribal courts, do the judges need to go to law school? How does that, are they elected? Like, how does one become a judge in a tribal court?
So every tribe is different. It says in their law. So some tribes will say a tribal judge can be, the requirements are you have to be 21 years old and you have to be a tribal member. And sometimes there's an election process where, during tribal election times, we all know those are fun, that you could elect whoever's on the ballot to elect somebody from the community to be a tribal judge. Other tribes have codes that state in order to be a tribal judge, you have to go to a law school. You have to have a law degree from an accredited U.S. law school. So really, it just depends on the tribe. Sometimes tribes even will say whether they want their judge to wear a black robe. And some tribes will say, no, we don't want our judges to wear black robe because we just kind of, we don't need it. Other tribes will also have benches, right? We're used to the bench where it's high and then people sit low. Some tribes are doing away with that and they're having just kind of equal, where you have the judge at the same level as the court parties. So every code really will determine the way the structure of the courts are set up.
Thank you. I love the idea of not having the high bench.
It makes sense. Tribal courts are so awesome.
They really are. So we're getting time to wind down. We have one final question that Justine will ask, and then we'll move on from there. So go ahead, Teen.
Yeah, we're getting ready to wind down. So just before, I know we've been talking for over an hour and want to do like a quick summary of what, so I've captured a lot, but like we talked about and defined tribal sovereignty, which was awesome. And of course, defining tribal sovereignty, it helps us really learn about tribal courts and the importance of them. And what really stuck out to me, it was restoring balance. I feel like that needs to be on a t-shirt. I'm like, why hasn't someone made a t-shirt of that? Yeah. And the last thing I really want to that took away too is I'm worried about the new administration. You really helped me take a breath and realize that we're still here and we're still going to fight. And there's so many individuals on the front line ready to go, they're not going to just, let things happen. So thanks so much for all your wisdom today. And we're wondering for our last question, how can current tribal clerks access your trainings? Because I know you do trainings, right? Or advocate to their tribal court / their tribal government to have you train them. So where can they get all your information?
So right now, current tribal court clerks could always contact me for individual one-on-one online Zoom training. And this year I'm going to be doing more of not only one-on-one training, but group training. So I'll post webinar dates and people could sign up for active tribal court clerks or court administrators. I'm definitely working on expanding. I'm working on really trying to work with maybe a local tribal college to help community members become and learn how to become a tribal court clerk and a court administrator. And right now there's no education out there that has a program for that. And so I'm really I worked with a tribal college in the past, but I haven't been able to really keep that consistent. So I just want to let schools know that I'm open to really trying to create a certificate program or do something to really promote more education to our community members on how to work in a tribal court in the capacity of a court clerk or court administrator. Also for tribal council, or if you're in a court where that they're in court development, that I offer again online trainings and even in-person training as well for council or court development committee members to learn about kind of the structure on how what goes into developing a tribal court. In general, I do group training too. So for current court clerks and court administrators, if there's 5 of them, I could definitely go out there to do an on-the-site training. Just contact my website. And I want to also add that I'm working on creating more public online trainings as well, because I think, like yourself, you learned a whole lot today, and I have a whole lot more to share about tribal courts in general and what they do and kind of their structures. And I have learned that there's been an interest from the public to really learn, because there's not really anywhere to go. And so anyway, that is coming soon. So stay tuned.
Yay, we will stay tuned.
Yay. So yeah, please contact me. Go to my website or my email, fieldotribalcourts@gmail.com. And thank you so much for today. And I hope, people took away with something. No, tribal courts are amazing. The people that work there are amazing. And that's also part of my motivation to just not only that I believe in the mission and the purpose of tribal courts, but I love the people that work there, because they all genuinely care about community. They care about sovereignty, and they care about just service to the people and helping others. So all of that together, it's a wonderful, it just makes me want to work forever, because I love working with tribal courts so much.
Yay, that's awesome. I love it. And yeah, if you're working at a tribal court, shout out to you for giving back to the people, giving back to your community. We support you, we see you, and we're just really happy that we have the sovereignty, the authority to have a tribal court. So that's something that I think we need to embrace and not take for granted. Okay, well, it has been a day. Teen, any last words?
Deep breath.
I know, deep breath. As we get back to the real world and continually battling and fighting for the good fight for our people.
The good fight.
Mm-hmm.
Yes.
Awesome. Did you want to do the invite for our next episode?
You can go ahead.
Okay, awesome. Thank you so much for joining us, or if you're tuning in and listening to the recording, join us for our next episode, which will be February 13th, right before Valentine's Day. And I don't know if I'm supposed to say our topic, but our topic is going to be like self-care, self-love. So we'll be focusing on that next month. But thank you all for joining in today. We'll see you next month. Bye.
Thank you.
Thank
Bye.
you.
Oh, 5:30. 5:30.
February.
Yeah.
Tune in.
Thank you.
And bye, April. Thank you for all your help behind the scenes. She's going to leave us with a ending.